Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today, and we welcome you to the 2022 hurricane season kickoff. My name is Kimberly Cristiano, and I'm the city's emergency manager under the Fire Rescue Department. Last week, you might have experienced the tropical storm force potential of the tropical storm force winds, and what that was a great wake-up call for us all. So to kick us off today, I'd like to introduce our mayor. Welcome our mayor. I'm sure you all know him very well. Mayor Rex Hardin, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. I appreciate it. And thank you for those folks who are actually tuning in to watch this. This presentation, it's not for us. This is for you folks at home to really pay attention. We've got a lot of great information we're going to try and pass on to you to get ready for the hurricane season. As Kimberly mentioned, we had an eye-opener here just this past week with a storm that came across the Yucatan Peninsula, and really was an eye-opener for us. So it doesn't take massive winds to create a real problem for our community. And that's why you really need to listen to the pointers and the tips and all the information we're going to have for you here today to get ready for hurricane season. I know we're already in hurricane season, but take the tip now to go ahead and do what you need to do to prepare for everything that could potentially be out there for us. Hopefully we'll be able to skate through another year without any massive impacts, but there's no guarantee, and that's why we all have to be prepared. So we've got a bunch of people to talk to you today about all the things we should be doing now rather than waiting until the last minute, because I'll tell you, when the last minute hits, we've got a storm on the horizon, that's not when you want to start thinking about, okay, your batteries, your food supply, your medicine supply, your gas for your car. You need to be getting ready early, and that's what this is about. So please, pay attention to this presentation, take the advice to heart, and really get ready early. It pays huge dividends. We've got the best staff possible to help you in times of emergency, but we can't get to you in the beginning stages, and that's why you need to be prepared. Thank you so much, Kimberly. I'll turn it back over to you, and thank you so much for paying attention.
Thank you so much, Mayor. And thank you for your leadership. This city, we're all very grateful. We have a great team, thanks to leaders such as yourself, and we couldn't do it without you. You've led us through the pandemic, and you've led us through other storms and other types of emergencies. So we're all very grateful for your leadership. We also have another leader with us today, leader and my boss, Fire Chief Brocado.
Thank you. Well, it's probably not the most welcome time of the year for hurricane season, but it's a necessary time of year. And from the fire rescue side of the house, what we consider is you are a part of our plan. Your preparation is part of our plan. Immediately after a strong wind, strong flooding event, it is very difficult for our units to get out onto the roadways to be able to render assistance. So we need you to be prepared so that you can start off the storm on the right foot, so to speak. And then once our units get through, if you need assistance from us, that's those times when we'll be able to render assistance and care. This is the time to pay attention, to listen, to update any of the things that you have. What is your plan? What is your family's plan? Do you have the proper supplies? All of those things mean something for us as a fire rescue system, because this is a community. We're here to respond, we're here to support, but we need your help in preparing for all of these events. I'm so grateful to have you, and have a great day.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much for your leadership. We couldn't do it without you. I'd like to just go over the agenda of what we have planned for you today. We have a number of speakers so that we can hit all of the points that are critical, for your disaster preparedness plan. How to create your disaster preparedness plan. We have a lot of new residents to our area, as well as people who have been here for decades. So we have as you know, our population is increasing dramatically. The environment has a lot of impacts. We have a lot of things that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. June 1st to November 30th, 6 months out of the year, we need to have our disaster preparedness plan in place. And while I get your attention for hurricane season, I like to really say it's all hazard. There's a lot of different things. As you know, we touch upon cybersecurity. We touch upon any type of natural disaster. Pandemics, we're very familiar with that now. So any type of natural or man-made disaster is what we're going to help you plan for today, because this will touch on all of them. But again, it is hurricane season. That is one of our greatest threats, but we do have emerging threats also. Emergency communications, this is a critical part of what we do, how we communicate with you and how you can help us communicate with you. Your one-stop shop planning tool. We have a web page so that you don't have to go to many different places. You just need to know this one spot to go. We call it the one-stop shop. Try to make it convenient so that everything that you need is in one place. If you have any recommendations, we're always open to that as well. Another tips for residents, debris. We know that's a really big topic. How we clean up debris, what you should be doing now in advance, prior to a disaster occurring, prior to those wind types of events, prior to flood types of events, tornadoes, etc. What are things that you should be doing and looking for, and what you should be doing afterwards, after a larger disaster. Sandbags, hot topic, even a hot topic just as recent as the beginning of hurricane season this year. What we do there, we have a sandbag policy. Hurricane season outlook. We've saved one of our best for last, Rob Molleda. He has been with us for years. As you might know, we do this on an annual basis. So this is another annual kickoff. I think we only missed one during the pandemic, the beginning of the pandemic, but we did reach out and do one of these again last year. So he's the warning coordination meteorologist with the National Weather Service out of the Miami office. So he is always a great wealth of information. And I'm going to go through these slides, and what you'll see is these are hot topics of everything that you should be doing to create your plan. It gives you the framework, so then you can go back afterwards and say, okay, I remember this information, but they might have said this or that. We're going to have this on our government channel. We're going to have this on our web page. We're going to have this on YouTube, so you can go back and refer to it again and again if need be. Determine your risk. I think this last weekend, we almost had all of these, I think, except storm surge. But we had a threat for strong winds, did not reach tropical storm force, but we did have a tropical storm warning. And I don't want us to underestimate the power of tropical storms. A lot of times I hear people say, it's just a tropical storm. Okay, Rob's going to get into more of that later, but I would just want everybody to be very cautious, because even a non-tropical storm, which is what we experienced this last weekend, brought great challenges. It brought some of our systems to a very challenging limit there. So I just want you to be aware of that. Obviously, tornadoes, rip currents, flooding, and rainfall. So we had all of those last weekend, and this year's expected to be a very busy season as well. So let's not let our guards down. Developing your evacuation plan. Find out if you live in an evacuation zone. Here in the city of Pompano Beach, if you are in a mobile home or east of Federal Highway, you are in an evacuation zone. You're also in an evacuation zone if you're on the barrier islands. There's different levels, and we will give you instructions through our public communications on what level we are evacuating and at what points in time. It's very important to listen to credible sources of information. There's so much information out there. Make sure that you're paying attention to where you can get your credible information. Planning for your pets, planning your evacuation routes. We saw after Hurricane Irma how busy the highways were. You do not need to go miles and miles outside of the evacuation zone to be safe. Complete your written plan. We're going to go over some of the highlights of that and what to do. Every family has individual needs. Only you know exactly what your family needs. Medical, children, pets. Every family is different. Every family has different needs. Where to keep your critical documents, how to retain those documents, and sharing your plan. Make sure someone outside of the evacuation area, if you leave, that you let them know, your family members or friends outside the area. Because guess what? If they can't find you, they come to us looking for you. So that helps. Assembling your disaster supplies, food and water, medicine and prescriptions. Medicine and prescriptions. If you can now get a 90-day supply, that would be very helpful. Because if we do get a very bad storm where there is a lot of damage, there's potential for these the pharmacies to not be open. That's something to really pay attention to. Cash on hand, small bills. singles, fives, etc. Because even the pizza guy might have, a gas oven, but not have electricity, and can take cash, but can't do a credit card. So that kind of a thing to keep in mind. And then you can buy pizza for all of your neighbors too. Radio, batteries, obviously your weather radio, your batteries, phone chargers, anything like that, and anything you can do in advance to make sure that you have all of those supplies. Keeping your gas tank full, I know that's a huge challenge nowadays. Supply and demand is a big issue, and it's supply and the supply chain issues. It's something I'm very cautious about right now, because I see issues with that. We saw with baby food and things like that. So please try to prepare now of what you should be preparing for your family. It's very, very important. Here's an example of the one-stop shop. And what I put here is the web page. Okay, this is the web page, pompanobeachfl.gov/getready. That is where you will find your one-stop shop. Ms. Sandra King's going to be going into how we communicate and all the different methods, but here's where you will find your shelters. Here's where you will find how to sign up for a special needs registry. Here's where you will find out information about sandbags. Here's where you will find out information if we are doing a food and water distribution site. Here's where you will find out vulnerable population registry. We want to stay in contact with you. If you decide you're not going to evacuate, but you might have some minor medical needs and you've decided to stay in your house, which is a great idea, because shelters are not a great option if you don't have to go to them. We go through all of that. And we're always, here to answer questions too. Anything that we can do to help guide you through the process, we're more than willing to do that. Insurance checkup. This is something that's often overlooked. It's not a fun thing to do, but you start with having a plan. What is your insurance policy? Buying that policy, flood and wind. Okay, flood and wind insurance. Know where that policy is. Make sure you do a video, just a simple video. Like last week when we were having that storm come through, I just did a quick walk through the house. Now that we have all these methods of retaining this data on our cell phones or iCloud or what have you, or on a jump drive, you can keep that and bring it with you. That way you have the most current information possible. Okay, strengthening your home. That goes kind of without saying, but we're gonna touch on today later on about trimming trees and pruning. We're gonna talk about, I'll talk about that right here, covering your windows. All right, I think that goes without saying, unless you are brand new to a tropical area or even up north or any area that gets hurricanes or tornadoes, you wanna have wall coverings, window coverings. Okay, you wanna have either, whether it's wood or storm windows, storm shutters, obviously. And don't forget your garage doors. Garage doors are a very vulnerable access point, so make sure that those are also retrofit. There's a lot of different things that you can do to strengthen your home. Obviously bringing in loose items and also moving your vehicle to a safe location. Know what that plan is. Where would you put your vehicle? And obviously securing your all doors. All doors also as well as the entrances to the garage doors. Helping your neighbor. I can't say this enough. When we go out to speak to different groups and so forth, help your neighbors. They may not be as prepared. They may not have the ability to be that prepared. They may have other stressors in their life, right? Why they have not prepared for whatever reason. They might be, elderly and they just haven't taken it seriously. There's a lot of different reasons. But check on your neighbors. Know who your neighbors are. That's really something that if everybody, we always said adopt a neighbor. If everyone looked after their neighbor, then we would be much better off and we'd be able to help much faster as well. Because we do have a program that teaches you how to take care of yourself, your family, your neighbors in a 8-week program, once a week. We're going to talk about that in a little bit also. Check in with them after the storm passes, obviously. Okay, volunteer. This is one of the tabs on our webpage. So volunteer, how to become certified. Now this is a FEMA-sponsored class that we run through our fire department. We run this once or twice a year. We have a class coming up on August 4th. And I encourage everyone to take this class, sign up. We have a limited number of seats, but we try to do what we can to get everyone in at that time. So please register as soon as you can for that. It's an 8-week class, but it's once a week for 3 hours in the evening. And it'll teach you some minor things that you can do, major things, minor first aid. How about putting out a small fire? Some light search and rescue. Things that you can do to get yourself out of a very bad situation or help your neighbors that are. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our Public Communications Director, Administrator, Strategic Communications Director. Thank you. Sandra King.
Thank you, Kimberly. So one thing that we know for sure is it wasn't too long ago when the only way we got information and communication about a storm was to watch the news. And when your power went, you either had a transistor radio or you were out of luck. We all know that that has significantly changed over the years, and now we have a plethora of ways to get information, and that little cell phone that everybody has tethered to them is, believe it or not, one of the most popular ways that people today get their information. So I'm going to walk you through some of the emergency communications that we have, and it's good to know now because emergency communications is something that changes in a minute. And so we have to change with it. So it's nice to know in advance, well, here's where I'm going to go to get the most up-to-date information. And you watch your news, which is absolutely what we want you to do. You'll hear from the meteorologists, the Hurricane Center, and you'll get that information. But, you know, what I do is I issue press releases to the media. And it goes out with the pertinent information about closures or anything that's happened or blocked roads, and I send that out to over 200 locations from Miami to Palm Beach for the news media to pick up our news and report it on the news. These press releases are also on the website, and these are the official press releases meant predominantly for the press to pass along to you, the public. We obviously have a website, and Kimberly just pointed out that we have a special page on the website, which is the PompanoBeachFL.gov/get ready. But what we do is you can go and look at that anytime you want and look for preparations. However, if a storm is pending and we know we are going to be under, or we become under a storm watch, storm warning, any of those, we will have a banner at the top of our website, which is just PompanoBeachFL.gov, and it'll have a picture of a storm. All you have to do is click on that, and it'll automatically take you to that storm page where everything is updated. In fact, we update it daily, weekly, monthly, hourly, sometimes up to the minute during a storm. So what we do is on that page that Kimberly showed you is you'll see a box where there's a map. You can actually dial in to Pompano Beach and you'll see a live interactive map of the storm and the cone of concern and everything else that's on there. There's a lot of information on there. We link to the National Weather Service, and what we also do is if there is any kind of a warning, if there's a hurricane that's coming, whatever is broadcast by them, we link to. So we don't make those decisions, they do. So to make sure that we are absolutely accurate, we link to them, so anything they put out, you can click on and you will see that in live time. That's also on that hurricane page. It's very important. And there it is with all the different tabs. And you'll see, it's fun right now if you go on it and navigate. And you might really like the map. You might really like the prep page. You might really like, well, let me link to this. And so when the storm is imminent, you know exactly where you're going to go. Well, let me click on the map. That was really interesting. So that's on our website now, and that's updated. One important thing that has changed, as you know, you can ask anyone, and it wasn't too long ago that we used our code red emergency notification system, and we called landlines. You know, those phones that are well, tied into the wall that we hardly have anymore. And we would actually use phone book data and other data to reach out to people with the code red emergency notification system. And that is only used for emergencies. So if there is water distribution, there is something very important that we need to get out, we utilize code red. Well, this has come a long way. And now what you can do is you need to go on our website and you'll see the code red tab. You can sign up your cell phones. You can sign up your family cell phones, your children's cell phones. So any notification that we put out using the code red emergency notification, a telephone system, you can get it on all of your cell phones. So you don't even have to live in Pompano Beach. If you work in Pompano Beach, you're concerned about your business, always sign up for code red. Get your neighbors to sign up for code red and get those city emergency notifications. You'll be very thankful you do. One thing we learned in the last several years is that we want all of our emergency information and communication to go through our website. What we found is sometimes people went to the app on the phone. That's not our website, but it's an app. And so people thought that the app was the website. They didn't understand. So they said, well, why wasn't I able to get hurricane information on the app? And that's a very good question. So we don't want people to have to root around for information. So we went ahead and added a link, you can see it on the bottom left, that will go directly to that hurricane page on the city's app, just in case someone pulls that up. We now have that. And then we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, but it's also interesting to know that during a real storm that is imminent, that is coming, on Facebook we do what's called going dark. And Facebook is really a communication social network. It is not an emergency network. So during a storm, during warnings and watches, we stop putting up information about events and things like that, and talk about things that people are not interested in a possible emergency. What we do put up is, please go to pompanobeachfl.gov and get up-to-the-minute information on the storm. And we will have a link on there asking people to go to our website and get information. So we also put out Twitter, our press releases go out on there. So basically we're on every single type of media channel that you can think of, and you can get exact information on Pompano Beach. So maybe the news stations cover it, but they may not know some of the things that Pompano Beach is doing specific to our city. And that's why you'll want to sign up for Code Red, go to our pompanobeachfl.gov/get ready, and look up all the things happening in Pompano Beach. So that concludes all of the different emergency communications that we utilize, and hopefully we don't have to, but we are prepared if we do. Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you, Sandra. Is it true that they can also receive a text or an email through that system?
Yes.
Okay, great. So it's voice, text, and email. Highly recommend that. We have a very popular person coming up here. He is our Environmental Services Director, who is in charge of after storm debris. He does a lot of things all day, every day, but he's very popular also during the storm. So come on up, Russ Ketchem. Thank you, Russ.
Thank you. Handy dandy little clicker here. All right, so I'm going to talk about storm debris, and basically preparing for a storm is where I'm going to start. One of the big things that everybody gets excited about when the discussion of a storm coming in, being a hurricane, tropical storm, or anything of that significant, everybody has the idea, you know what, I'm going to trim my trees. This is a great time to take down those coconuts. And it's probably the worst time to take down those coconuts and trim those trees. The best time is now. To do it before the storm, do it early in the season, do it before the season. Trees don't grow that fast. Because when a storm comes out and all of a sudden we get into the cone, or at least a discussion of a possible landfall, things get very, very busy. And we get a lot of phone calls. I just trimmed my trees. We'll be shutting down the city, and hours before we clear, the phone will be ringing. I got a pile of debris. I just finished cutting my trees. We'll hear the chainsaws going on as we're driving around, buttoning up the city. Don't. Please, do it now, because most of those piles won't be picked up because we have to try to clear the streets. Most of them will be out of compliance because they're just going to be too large. And so just do yourself a favor and do it now. So now the storm comes. And fortunately, for our area, we don't have devastation like this, which is structural and all that, but it does occur. We're fortunate in the fact that most of our debris that we've dealt with over the last many, many years is vegetative debris. So the vegetative debris, as you know, will come down and the storm goes through, and we're going to start clearing and getting everything going. So some of the trucks you're going to see as we ramp up the clearing event are going to be trucks like this. They're going to be grapple trucks, they're going to be larger trucks, they're going to be backhoes, pretty much anything and everything we can get our hands on. So what we need to do is basically stay clear of the equipment when they're in your area, okay? Pile up the material and let these big boys work. Because some of these, as you can see, are very, very large because, again, they're not just stopping at your house, they're going down the road until they fill up. Ultimately, material will go to a processing site, temporary debris site. The site will reduce the material, get it into a manageable state for ultimate disposal or processing. So this site's pretty important. This is the one that you really need to focus on. And as you can see, depending on the storm, you may have different types of debris, okay? You may have your fence that went down, you may have your shed that went down, you may have your tree that went down. So what we're asking for everybody to do is keep those piles separated at the curb, okay? You have room, do the best you can, but keep them separated. Why? Because they go into different locations. We handle them a little different. Things to look out for. You want to look out for, obviously, fire hydrants. You want to look out for telephone poles. You want to not put the debris next to your house on the other side of the sidewalk if you have one. You want to put it on the curb, okay, as close to the road as you can. Not in the road, please, but close to the road. And then we'll be sending the trucks. Normally what ends up happening when a storm starts coming in, garbage service stops for safety reasons. So again, it does start back up, but it's on a limited basis because, as you can imagine, we have to do a lot of things. We have to clear the streets, and there's a priority sheet that we do. We have to clear what they call the cut and push. We have to make sure the lines are dead, meaning the power lines. We have certain things to do. So again, please be patient. But put your material, and again, separate the material on the type of the curb. So as I've stated over and over again, the time is now to prepare. The time is now to look at that tree, to look at your coconuts, trim them, dispose of them, and let's move on. So again, before a storm, put the material in your containers. You can put it on the side. Utilize your carts, your gray carts. And that's all year round, by the way. So if you have that coconut, palm frond, whatever, stick it in that gray cart. You don't have to, don't put 2 palm fronds and a coconut on the ground, please. Stick it in the gray cart. And that's all year round, so it doesn't matter if there's a storm or not. Okay? If you have to make a pile, please keep it as together as you can. And as you can see with this land clearing, please don't decide I'm going to clean my backyard. Okay? Again, that's a bad pile for numerous reasons. It's by a telephone pole. It's in his driveway. When these trucks come through, they're here to pick up the debris and move on. As you can imagine, we have a lot of pressure to get the city cleared. So please don't put it on your pavered driveway because they will tear it up, I will almost guarantee you. This is a good sign. Okay, good slide rather. So 24, 36 hours before a storm is, again, not the time to trim. It will not be removed. Okay? It won't be removed. So again, I get a lot of phone calls on, oh, my neighbor trimmed his trees and all this. For example, the coconuts. Get a lot of calls on coconuts. People love trimming coconuts. So they're on the ground. It takes about 200 miles an hour, for the record, for a coconut to lift off and become a projectile. Projectile is one of the favorite words I hear over and over again. If you have a storm that's 200 miles an hour, you have bigger things coming through your window. Mailbox, neighborhood cat, exact, you name it. Sandbags. As has been stated over and over again, we just finished an event. They called it PTC, if I'm correct, number 1. Thank you, I'm getting the head nod. So that was a rain event. It wasn't a wind event, but it rained. As everybody knows, it rained and rained and rained. So the city made the decision to give out sandbags. There's times where the city makes that decision that, okay, we're prepared to give out sandbags for the rain. So we set up a location, the bags are filled, they're pre-filled, and we give out 10 bags per residence with a C, so per household. So don't send your family of 4 and expect to get 40 of them. This is a hurricane guide that's available all year round. It gives you kind of a wrap-up on debris and, kind of the do's and the don'ts and so forth on a high level. As mentioned before, there's also that website that is available, and I recommend highly you go to it throughout the year just to keep on top of things. And, but again, these are available. They're available at City Hall. They're available at civic centers and so forth. We even try to mail them out if possible. And again, it's a good overview. If this is your first storm or your 40th storm, it's always good to stay on top of things because it does change. It does change. And again, that handy-dandy little map there to show, or rather a diagram to show you where to put your stuff is also on there. So again, I appreciate the time, and hopefully we don't have an event, but if we do, please prepare correctly. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rush. Great information. Yes, thank you. So you can see, that was just one of our departments that we highlighted. And public communications, another department. Every department in our city has a plan. Every employee we consider essential. Because we know if we really have a significant storm with significant damage, we're going to have to replenish our staff. They're going to get exhausted. We're going to have to go on rotations and so forth. So our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center, it's manned 24/7 during an event like this. We go into lockdown, we don't leave. And then when it comes back to hit the roads and that we have the all clear, or at least the majority of the storm has passed by us and it's safe enough for our crews to go out in the heavier machinery, then we will send them out. So my question to you is, we have a plan. Do you? With that, I'm going to turn it over to Rob Molleda. He's with the National Weather Service, the Miami office, and the senior meteorologist.
Thanks, Kimberly. I'm the warning coordination meteorologist. That's, but it's, yeah, I know it's a kind of a long title, maybe a little bit of a, scary title because, I'm talking about warnings and stuff, yes. But anyway, thank you very much. Yes, it's another hurricane season, and, we've been hearing some really, really good advice. A lot of stuff that I normally say in other presentations, and, it's just really, really important to make sure that you're getting the information from the city here, from Kimberly, her staff, and from all the other folks who work hard here in Pompano Beach to make sure that you have all the information and all the things you need to get through a storm as safely as possible. So this is the outlook that NOAA is the parent agency of the National Weather Service, the outlook that we released at the end of May. So the outlook indicates the number of storms that we expect to form over the entire Atlantic Ocean, basically from the west coast of Africa all the way over to North America, to Florida, our part of the Atlantic here. So anywhere in that area over the 6-month period of the hurricane season, this is what we're forecasting. So we're forecasting anywhere from 14 to 21 named storms. From those, 6 to 10 could become hurricanes, and then of those, 3 to 6 could become major hurricanes. So compared to the normal values, which are the ones there in the black on the right, those are a reflection of above normal, in other words, they are above normal. So we're expecting an active season as far as storms forming out there in the Atlantic Ocean. So another way to look at it there is you look at that pie chart, it kind of breaks it down by what's the chance of an above normal season, a near normal season and a below normal season. So, of course, those numbers are indicating above normal number of storms, so 65% chance of an above normal season, about a 25% chance of a near normal season, so somewhere, values that are somewhere near those black numbers on the right, and a low chance, 10% chance that we're going to end up with below normal number of storms. These are the names. I know this is always a popular thing to take a look at because we'll be hearing a lot of these names. Hopefully not too many of them, but we're going to definitely see some of these names as the year goes on. We already had Alex here early in June, and the next name on the list will be Bonnie, and so on and so forth. The last 2 years, or the previous 2 seasons, 2020 and 2021, we actually went through this entire list, and in 2020 we had to go to another list because we actually went up to 30 named storms. So hopefully we won't get anywhere near that here in 2022. So, you've been hearing, get ready, have a plan, absolutely. But make sure that you stay ready throughout the year, or throughout the season at least. So, I always say hurricane season is really a marathon, it's not a sprint. So, we want to be ready, but we need to stay ready. So, you don't want to be ready. In other words, you don't want to get ready, do all those things you have to do to get ready, and then just, kind of wear yourself out and forget about hurricanes. No, we need to be mindful of it throughout the season. Now, fortunately, we don't have, a lot of activity throughout the entire season, and I have some information on that coming up. But certainly, especially once we get to the more active, to the most active part of the season, which starts in August, that's when we really, really have to be ready. And keep in mind that the seasonal forecast that what I just showed you, that's not a landfall forecast. So it's not an indication of whether we're going to get hit or not here in South Florida necessarily. I mean, we might not. And, and we really can't forecast storms that are going to, form 2, 3, 4 months from now. We don't have that ability. The weather systems that basically influence those storms or basically have a say in where those storms are going to go, those weather systems aren't even in existence yet. So we can't forecast what we can't see. But just keep in mind that hurricane season is here and we simply have to get ready. And as I mentioned, hurricane season in a typical year, the level of activity is not evenly distributed. So those yellow and red lines indicate kind of the average number of storms for any point during the season. So starting out in June and July, we don't, we get a few storms here and there, but it's not usually, at least, not terribly active. But once we get to August, and so I put that yellow rectangle there, a box there, so that's kind of highlighting the most active part of the season, what we call the peak of hurricane season. So that really starts in August. It goes all the way through September and really goes all the way through October. October in particular, for South Florida, is actually the month in which we've been hit the most by hurricanes. I know that stat might be surprising to some people, but it's really all 3 months, August, September, and October. All the major hurricanes that have hit South Florida have hit in those 3 months. And all but one hurricane has hit. In other words, of all the hurricanes, only one has hit outside of that September or August, September, and October period. So it doesn't mean that we don't have to be ready until August, but it just means that we definitely have to be ready by August because that's when we're most vulnerable, historically speaking, from hurricanes and the bigger storms. So at the end of the day, this is really what I would consider to be what should be our motivator for being ready every year. This is our hurricane history here in Broward County. This map is centered on Fort Lauderdale, but for Pompano Beach, it would be virtually the same. This map shows the tracks of the centers of all the hurricanes that have passed within 50 miles of Fort Lauderdale since 1865. So essentially, these are direct hits on Broward County, including the Pompano Beach area. And we've had 39 of those since 1865. So that may not seem like a high number, but when you think about it, hurricanes are not common events. I mean, they don't occur every day or even every year in one location, obviously. But so to have that many hurricanes directly hit us over, a period of 150 years or so, That's a high number. In fact, it's about as high here as it is in any other part of the country. In fact, we're really right at the top of the list pretty much when it comes to historically hurricane-prone areas. So this alone should be our reason to get ready. You know, we live in a hurricane-prone area. We've been hit by hurricanes in years that have been active. We've been hit by hurricanes in years that have been inactive. So the overall level of activity is not a major determining factor in what our chances of being hit are this year. Kimberly earlier talked about the different hazards of the storm, so it's really important that we keep in mind that hurricanes are about more than just one thing. You know, of course, the wind is an important part of that. And the wind is what classifies the storms. So, for example, we call it a hurricane when the winds reach 74 miles an hour. And then we have the different category storms. So we go from 1 to 5. 1 being winds of 74 to 95 miles per hour. And then category 5 at the top of the scale, winds in excess of 156 miles per hour. Each of these categories represents dangerous hurricane force winds. But as you go up the scale, the level of severity increases, to the point where when you get to a category 5, we're talking about destruction of many areas, especially, you know, older structures might be more vulnerable. So anyway, you know, the Saffir-Simpson scale, which is what that scale is very important. But keep in mind, it's only a wind scale. There are other hazards that we, of course, need to be very mindful of. And they deal with the water primarily. So we have storm surge. You heard Kimberly mentioned the evacuation, or the evacuation zones. And those zones are based on our vulnerability to storm surge. Also, we have to keep in mind rainfall can produce a lot of flooding. We had a lot of flooding here just a few days ago in the early part of June from a tropical disturbance. And that flooding can, you know, in a high-end event can be quite dangerous. So the water is what kills the vast majority of people in hurricanes in the United States. So storm surge is the rise of water in the ocean. So it's basically an increase in the water level of the ocean due to the hurricane winds pushing up that water level. So when you have a storm out there that's approaching land, that water that hurricane is beginning to pile up begins to come toward the coastline. It's piling up as it reaches the coast, so it gets even higher. And then when it moves inland, when it reaches the coastline, it's going to continue to move inland for some way, you know, for you know, a pretty good amount of distance. It's not just going to stop at the beach like on a typical day. So storm surge is not just a threat right at the beach. Here, you go to here. Here are the zones. So these are the evacuation zones, and you heard them referenced earlier. So we have in Broward County, we have 2 zones. We have Zone A, which is the barrier island, and Zone B is the mainland from the Intracoastal Waterway west of Federal Highway. It doesn't mean that you can't get some kind of surge west of Federal Highway in a high-end storm. You could, but it likely, I mean, in all likelihood, it won't be life-threatening. It won't be as deep as it is in areas east of Federal Highway. So that's how these evacuation zones have been determined. They're determined based on storm surge models, take into account, for example, the intensity or the strength of the storm, how strong the winds are. So we bring in storms of different categories. We bring in storms, you know, moving directly from the east, maybe storms coming, moving from south to north. So we change the direction of motion. We change the forward speed of the storm, the angle of approach, all those things. We run those models to come up with these, with these storm surge vulnerable areas, which is what those evacuation zones represent. So when there's an actual storm out there, then we run those storm surge models based on that actual storm. So we no longer run them on these hypothetical or theoretical storms, but we're running them based on that storm itself. So that's where all these things matter, such as the strength of the storm that we're tracking, the forward speed and the angle of approach. Those are all really important factors. So, storm surge is a pretty rare occurrence in any one particular location. So, here in Pompano Beach, for example, it's been a long time since we've had a damaging storm surge. Irma, in 2017, we had maybe a couple feet, 2-3 feet of storm surge. Certainly noteworthy, but not extremely impactful. You go back, though, to the 1940s. I know, most of us weren't around in the 1940s here, but there was a big storm surge that was estimated to be over 8 feet. That, again, 8 feet, probably right at the coastline. It actually flooded areas as far west as Federal Highway. So, we have had those big storm surges before, and there's nothing to say that it can't happen again. It just, takes the storm moving in a certain direction, making direct landfall, and we can get a significant life-threatening surge here in Pompano Beach. So we have to be mindful of that. So let me go back to the storm surge, the evacuation zones. So if you live in any one of these zones, as Kimberly mentioned earlier, number one in your plan has to be, may I have to evacuate? And if you do live in one of those zones, you might have to. You might be ordered to evacuate. The most popular map or piece of information on the National Hurricane Center website, which by the way is hurricanes.gov, the most popular piece of information is this. It's what we call the forecast cone. It goes by different names, but essentially it's a map that depicts the forecast of the storm. So the forecast of where the center of the storm is expected to be over a 5-day period at different time frames during that 5-day period. And then we have a cone that gets drawn around each of those forecast points, or circles, I should say, that are drawn around each of those forecast points, and then those circles are connected to make that cone shape. So the forecast cone it tells you where the center of the storm is more likely to go. So when you look at this, say, okay, what's the cone telling me? Well, the cone is telling you that's, in a storm where we have like an average level of forecast skill, which is really what that's reflecting, an average level of forecast skill, there's a 2 in 3 chance that the center of the storm is going to fall somewhere within that cone. Of course, that means there's a 1 in 3 chance that at any point during that 5-day forecast, the center could go outside the cone. So, it's important to keep in mind as well. But there are certain things that the cone, or some important things that the cone does not tell you. The cone doesn't tell you, or doesn't give you any information on any of the storm's other hazards, such as the flooding rainfall, such as the storm surge, how strong the winds are going to be in my location. It doesn't really give you any of that specific information. It's just a general indicator of where the storm might be. It also doesn't give you any information on the size of the storm, how big the storm is, how far away from the center of the storm do those impacts extend. The cone is the same size for every storm in a given hurricane season because it's based on a statistical guide. It's drawn, the size of the cone is determined by our average forecast errors over the last 5 years. So the cone is redrawn every year based on whatever that average forecast error is over the last 5 years, and so that's what the cone is really representing. So if you notice, the cone gets bigger as you get farther out in the forecast period. So in this example here, the storm is still like 4 or 5 days away, so the cone over Florida is really large. But as you get closer to the cone gets smaller. And that's because, as the storm gets closer, we're more certain as to where the center of the storm is going to be. However, the storms themselves don't shrink as they get closer to us. In other words, they don't conform to the size of the cone. They stay the same size, or sometimes even get bigger. So don't fall into the trap of using the cone as, okay, if I'm in the cone, I'm in big trouble, and if I'm outside the cone, I'm okay. That's not the way it works. There are a lot of other factors that go into play. The cone is good just as a general guide as to where the center of the storm might be. And this is a good example of how our forecast skill, our improved forecast skill, has reduced the size of the cone. So we started doing the cone around 2002. So, 2003 is the purple one there, so right around the beginning when we started doing the cone. Look how big that cone was in 2003 compared to the red one, which is the one that we're using for this year, for 2022. A pretty big reduction in the size of the cone. But the storms themselves are not getting smaller in size necessarily. We have different size storms every season. We have big storms, small storms, storms that are in the middle. So again, the cone is not the area of potential impact. The cone is only for the center of the storm. Here's a good example. This is Hurricane Irma from 2017. So this was the forecast for Hurricane Irma about 36 hours before Irma made landfall in the Florida Keys, and then later, a few hours later, Irma made landfall in Southwest Florida. At this point, you see the cone, the right edge of that cone was actually west of South Florida. So it was actually out over the Everglades, pointing up more towards the west coast of Florida. So, okay, you look at that, some people might say, well, okay, I'm not in the cone anymore. I'm in pretty good shape. Wow, but look at the red lines around Florida. Those red lines actually indicate hurricane warnings. So we had hurricane warnings up despite the fact that the cone was had shifted already to our west. And this is the reason why we were under a hurricane warning. It's the size of the storm. Irma was a large storm. So the wind field, those hurricane force winds, those winds that were almost right up to hurricane force, extended well to the east and covered really all of South Florida, including the east coast. So we were outside the cone, but we were not outside of the area of impact. So that's why we go through the hard work to evaluate every hazard independently of where the cone is. So here's some pictures. This is from, again, Hurricane Irma. So Hurricane Irma was basically like a Category 1 type of storm for us here in Southeast Florida. But we had storm surge. We had docks getting damaged or destroyed. We had lots of flooding from both storm surge and from rainfall. And we were outside the cone 36 hours before. So again, just a reminder that the cone impacts extend well outside the cone. Okay, so what the cone is telling you, and I think this is where the cones, what the best part about the cone is that it focuses you away from that one exact forecast track. So, you may have a lot of faith, and you should have a lot of faith in that hurricane forecast track. The best hurricane forecasters in the world work at the National Hurricane Center here in Miami. Here in South Florida, they're responsible for all the hurricane forecasts for the entire Atlantic Ocean, including the ones that could affect Florida. But they'll be the first ones to tell you our forecasts are not perfect. In other words, they're not perfect to the mile. They might be really close, but they're not going to be perfect. So when we're looking at a forecast, when we're looking at a storm out there that's threatening us, the forecaster is actually not just looking at their actual forecast. So look at this example here in this map. The white line is the forecast from the Hurricane Center. But then what they're doing is they're also considering alternate scenarios. So they're considering tracks that could go either to the right of the forecast, and they're also considering tracks that could go to the left. So in other words, they're already assuming that there's going to be some deviation from their forecast. In other words, the track that the storm's actually going to take may differ by a little bit or may differ by a lot, depending on the situation. So when we're evaluating our level of potential impact from the different hazards of the storm, we have to keep this in mind. It's not just about one potential scenario that we're evaluating. We're evaluating many different potential alternate scenarios. So that's what these red and yellow lines represent coming out there. Those are different, those are all realistic scenarios that could happen if the storm deviates, again, from the forecast track, and it will deviate some. So that's important because we use that information in order to tell you, in order to give a threat assessment based on the latest forecast that's updated every 6 hours, so that we're giving you an idea of what level of threat you need to be prepared for each of the hazards associated with the storm. So what we do is, we take each of the scenarios, I'll bring up the other slide back here so you can see this again. So let's say you're in Florida. So, most of Florida in this example here is to the right of the forecast track. Well, if we were to evaluate, if we were doing our job and we're giving you an idea of what you need to be prepared for, we're going to depict a scenario that's going to be more threatening to us. In other words, we want to be prepared. We don't want to be underprepared. So if we're giving you threat information based on a scenario of the track going to the left of the forecast, or away from us, we're never going to show anything, right? But it's a realistic scenario that it could go the other way, that could go close to us. And in that situation, we need to be ready. We need to be ready. So we're always evaluating these potential scenarios. So what we end up depicting in our threat and impact maps that are always available on our website, and they're made available here to the city of Pompano Beach so that they can pass them along to you, this is the level of potential impact that we need to be prepared for in the event that the storm takes a track that is closer or over us. Again, in other words, we're depicting realistic scenarios here. We're not just depicting always a worst-case scenario. It's what we call a reasonable worst-case scenario. So a scenario that certainly is scientifically plausible, again, assuming that the storm is going to take a track closer to us instead of farther away from us. We want to be prepared for what's reasonably possible when we have these storms out there threatening our area. So we do these maps for each of the 4 hazards, so they're color-coded based on the level of threat. So the yellow colors are the lower level, orange is the next highest up, red is the second to highest, and then purple is the highest level. So, and so these are based on a range of potential scenarios. There's no such thing as one possible forecast scenario. There's really a range of possible scenarios. So we're telling you this is what could happen if we end up in one of those reasonable worst case scenarios, and unfortunately sometimes we do end up in those. And that's why we think this is important, in an important way for you to evaluate all the different hazards of the storm and to determine which one is of most threat to our community. So again, we do with these for the wind, for the storm surge, for the flooding rain, and for tornadoes. So they're individual threat assessments for each of those hazards, for each of the forecasts that come out. So then, of course, they come out on 6-hour cycles when we have our advisories for the storm. It's important also to know what the watch and the warning means. So when we go under, for example, when we go under a hurricane watch or a tropical storm watch, that means that hurricane or tropical storm conditions are possible somewhere in that watch area. Not everywhere, but somewhere in that watch area within 48 hours. So that could be a time when you need to certainly be in a heightened state of alert. You need to make sure that you have everything ready to go, your supplies, all the things that you're going to need to survive the storm. This could also be the time or near the time when evacuation orders could be issued, because it takes a long time to move people out of those storm surge vulnerable areas. Then when a warning is issued, whether it's a hurricane warning or a tropical storm warning, that means that those conditions are expected somewhere in that warning area, generally within about 36 hours. So again, for example, we may issue a hurricane warning for, let's see, Miami-Dade County, Broward County, Palm Beach County, maybe even all the way up into parts of Central Florida. That doesn't mean that we expect a hurricane to hit every one of those locations. What it means is that somewhere in that area, somewhere in that warning area is likely to get hurricane conditions, or is expected to get hurricane conditions. So again, we're taking into account some uncertainty into where exactly that storm is going to go, since we have to put these out 36 hours in advance to allow for large-scale community preparedness and for large-scale actions to be taken place. So again, there's inherent uncertainty in every weather forecast, especially when it comes to forecasting tropical storms and hurricanes. So, keep that in mind, when you see these forecasts come out and when you see the watches and warnings come out as well. Kimberly mentioned this, actually it's been a theme throughout this entire presentation here, is get the latest information from trusted sources. So National Weather Service, the City of Pompano Beach, the county, all these agencies, we're in communication throughout the event. We don't work independently of each other. We actually work together to make sure that you're getting the information directly from all the official sources. So we want to make sure that we're basically saying the same thing, and that message is going out in a consistent and timely manner. We need to be careful out there when we're monitoring social media. There's a lot of good information on social media, but there's also a lot of misinformation or a lot of information that's missing a lot of context or detail. So make sure that you focus on these local official sources of information. Now, we know that the storm itself is dangerous, and that's why we make all the preparations, that's why their evacuation orders are issued, etc. But there's another dangerous part of the storm, and it's actually the aftermath, after the storm. So the storm moves out, moves on through, goes away, and we're basically left behind to, pick up the pieces, if you will. So there's, people go out and inspect their property. There may be a lot of, down tree limbs, fences are down, roof damage, etc. Unfortunately, this is the time when we see a lot of what we call indirect storm fatalities. There's been almost 300 of those only in the last 5 years in the United States. So what happens here is that people go out and they run into some kind of trouble. You see it's broken down by many different categories. The leading causes of these indirect fatalities are vehicle accidents due to debris on the road, traffic signals are out because of lack of power or lack of electricity. Carbon monoxide poisoning, this is related mostly to the misuse of generators, people running generators inside a house instead of outside. So we need to be really careful when we're using those generators. Make sure you're operating them safely outside the house. Power electrocution, people stepping on down power lines. People think, well, the power line's down, it's probably dead. Well, it actually might still be live. And also heat exhaustion. Hurricanes often hit during the hottest time of the year. So when we lose power, the inside of the house is going to be hot, and then when we go outside to clean up debris or whatever, it's going to be really, really hot as well. So we need to be really careful and stay safe. Take it easy, really, as much as we can. I know it's a stressful situation after a storm. I've been in the aftermath of many storms, and your instinct is to go out there and clean up and do everything that you can. But we need to do it safely, keeping all these things here in mind. Not every storm is going to give us a long time for us to watch and to get ready for. Yes, a lot of them will do that, but many of them won't. In fact, there have been a total of eight of the strongest hurricanes that have hit the United States, Category 4s and 5s. Each one of those 8 were tropical storms 3 days before landfall. So they went through a rapid intensification from a tropical storm to a Cat 4 or Cat 5 in just 3 days. 4 of those hit Florida. So 4 of those rapidly intensifying storms hit Florida. The Labor Day hurricane in 1935, Hurricane Michael, Hurricane Andrew. So those 3 right there have hit Florida as Category 4s and 5s, and they were, again, 3 days before, they were only tropical storms. So, we need to keep track of those forecasts. We can't assume that just because a storm is a tropical storm, 2 days or 3 days from us, it doesn't mean that it can't get much stronger very quickly. They sometimes do. So it's really important to keep track of those forecasts. We update our forecasts every 6 hours. We issue a new advisory with brand new information on the storm. And hurricanes, really like all weather, is part of a continuously evolving process. Forecasts can and do change. So we need to be mindful of that. We don't want to fall into an anchoring bias, where in other words, what I'm trying to say here is that you see a forecast, let's say early in the event, and you say, okay, this is what's gonna happen, and everything that I'm gonna do is based on this scenario early in the event. Not keeping in mind that as the event goes on, that forecast scenario likely will change, and it may change by quite a bit. So keep track of the forecast as you do your preparations. Don't anchor yourself to one thing that may be present early on, but might change as you get closer to the storm. And that's why we're there 24 hours a day. That's why forecasters work around the clock to make sure that you have the latest information, especially when hurricanes are out there. We talked about the evacuation zones and that being a very important part of your plan. And also, you heard earlier, don't evacuate if you have to leave. If you can, evacuate within the area. Maybe, tens of miles instead of hundreds of miles. That way, we don't clog up the roads, and, we've seen and heard stories of, people getting stuck on the roads when they're evacuating from a storm. And, that's definitely not a scenario that anyone wants to see. So, if you are going to leave town, don't wait until the last minute. Allow yourself plenty of time, several days, if at all possible. Hurricanes can strike any year. I mentioned that at the beginning. We can get hit by hurricanes in active years, in inactive years. We get hit by storms of different categories, different sizes. But one thing is common, they all have hazards associated with them that we have to take seriously. So, don't over-rely on that exact forecast track. Keep in mind that, things can change, and our information is tailored and geared for that, to let you know of what could happen if things do change. So again, our website's weather.gov/Miami. That's where you can get all your up-to-date weather information, 24 hours a day, and especially when hurricanes are threatening, all the latest information will be on that website. So I thank you very much, and I hope that you have a very safe hurricane season. Thanks, Kimberly.
Thank you so much, Rob. I always enjoy your presentations. There's always great new information, too. And I made actually a couple of notes while I was sitting there. Well, number one, our partnership. You said that we work together, city, county, National Weather Service. We couldn't do it without you. I lean on you, I depend on you, your group, just a stellar group, and even for our special events throughout the year that we have, we're gonna do a drone show, we'll lean on them and say, we need this intelligence to share and what your recommendations are for our area and for certain wind speeds and so forth that we're giving. Making sure our messages are consistent across the board. There used to be a time when the county would give out an evacuation order, we would have an evacuation order at a separate time, and so forth. Everybody would start giving out different messages. Now, we have worked together collaboratively to make sure that we're sending out standardized messages so people are not confused and it's consistent. Rapid intensification of storms. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's something that I think that from the hurricane conferences this year, that was really drilled home, is that really we need to be mindful that a tropical storm, like we always, we hear that, oh, it's just a tropical storm, I'm not gonna really do anything. People let down their guard, they think it's not that big of a deal, and before you know it, it either ramps up or it becomes a huge, slow rainmaker, where we end up with lots of flooding and more deaths. Like Rob mentioned, a lot of the deaths that occur after a storm. And that's something that, we always try to teach and make people mindful. The recovery process can be long, it can be grueling, it's hot usually. So it's really be careful, make sure you have some of those things. Make sure you're not just learning how to use a chainsaw, things like that we've seen people do, and that we get those calls from fire rescue. Because one of the things I wanted to share with everyone is that everyone always says, well, when do you close, or when do you go into your lockdown? And Rob had it on one of his slides, the arrival time of tropical storm force winds, the best estimate that we have. We take into consideration, so we won't want people traveling on the roads. When are those tropical storm force winds anticipated? that kind of leans into, hey, you might see a city hall closed, in anticipation of a storm, but it could be because we're now going into protective actions. The mayor signed a local state of emergency, and we've gone into emergency mode so that we can ensure that the city and our residents are as safe as possible. So those are all the things that we're doing behind the scenes where you think, well, maybe City Hall is closed. We have so much going on. I don't know how often the briefings, I mean, I tracked my hours just from this non-event we had, this last system. I think I was up to 30 hours of just additional time, because it went through the night. And, you want to lead off with, before you go to bed, you want to see where it's at. Then I got to wake up at 4:45 and see what we're doing and make sure our game plan is ready for our staff, that we're all kind of marching in the right order, and I like to call it our battle rhythm. Because if we're not all on the same page and voicing some concerns and other things that might be occurring, I will usually have the National Weather Service on for the city manager so that we can make sure that we're making the most up-to-date current decisions that we need to, on behalf of the city of our emergency plans. So, but with that, yeah, after the storm, the cascading impacts of storms, that's what I always try to teach people too, is that, really what might not seem like a big event at first, I don't know how much you all know, but our utilities department had displayed Herculean effort this last weekend. And what you didn't see behind the scenes, because you don't realize what it takes to keep the water running in your home, what it takes to keep the toilets flushing, to make sure all of that is, and we met some challenges this weekend, and it got to some scary, levels of intensity. We had one mobile home park, one mobile home that had a tree, crash on it. Fortunately, those people were not injured, but, they were, that's a devastating, impact to their home. So we just want everybody to be prepared. We're always here to help and guide you through. We also do community presentations when requested. We have a lot this year. We've been doing some for some of the shelters, animal shelters. So we try to hit it all A to Z so we can help make our community as prepared as possible. So Rob, thank you again for being here, and all of the speakers that were here today. Wealth of knowledge, and thank you very much, and have a great, safe year.